Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents the Franchisee Handbook, Everything You Need to Know About Buying a Franchise, by Mark Siebert, narrated by Al Kessel. Foreword by Robert Crisanti, CFE, President and CEO, International Franchise Association. How do I know if owning a franchise is right for me? In my role as President and CEO of the International Franchise Association, IFA, I am asked that question all the time. And equally often I am asked, what is the best franchise to buy? How much does it cost to buy a franchise? And, is it better to buy a franchise or start my own business? The Franchisee Handbook will help you with these questions and many more you may not even realize you need to ask. Franchising accounts for nearly 760,000 franchise establishments that support 8.1 million direct jobs, $757 billion of economic output for the U.S. economy, and 3% of the gross domestic product, GDP. The International Franchise Association represents franchise companies in over 300 different business format categories. A number of IFA's franchisor members were introduced to our organization by Mark and Dave's team at iFranchise Group. The iFranchise team has many years of hands-on experience running franchise organizations and meeting with countless people just like you who are thinking of buying their own franchise. That background guides iFranchise Group's and the franchise industry's hallmark principle that franchising is successful when franchisees are successful. Franchisee success is a consistent theme throughout the Franchisee Handbook. Understanding the intricacies of the franchise sales process is at the heart of franchise development. Sometimes both franchisors and prospective franchisees alike need to hear the hard truth about having to turn away a candidate when it is clear the candidate will not be a good fit for the brand and will not be successful. This book will help you appreciate the risks of franchise ownership as well as its many rewards. The Franchisee Handbook provides a knowledgeable overview of franchising and how it works, and it will help you decide if you are ready to be a franchise owner. It will help you assess the amount of capital you have available, your skills, and your passion for business ownership. Mark takes you through the questions you need to ask yourself before you can even begin to look at specific franchise concepts and gives you key tools to assess specific concepts. The book will help you understand risk, the kinds of franchise opportunities that are available, and how to discern whether you should move forward. The Franchisee Handbook gives you a step-by-step roadmap to the whole process. As the leader of the world's oldest and largest organization representing the franchise industry, I know people like you. I understand your desire to own something where you can be your own boss, where you can build something with the support of an established brand and industry behind you, and where you can meet your personal and professional goals. I also know that the range of franchise options is exciting and almost limitless, with organizations run by some of the smartest, most innovative business professionals around. I encourage you to explore all that is out there, and I wish you the best. Introduction. This is a book about buying a franchise written by someone who has never owned one and likely never will. But make no mistake, I love franchising. When I took my first job in franchising in 1984, little did I know that it would become a lifelong passion. Franchising has given me the opportunity to work with businesses in almost every imaginable field and in businesses of all shapes and sizes, from single-unit operators to Fortune 500 companies. As one would expect, since a large majority of franchises are food-related, I have had the opportunity to work with dozens and dozens of food service operators, including companies like Auntie Anne's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Fuzzy's Taco Shop, McAllister's Deli, Nuke's Eatery, and many others when they started their franchise journeys. But I have also worked with companies in industries where one might not expect to find franchises. Massage Envy introduced franchising to the market for therapeutic massages. SkyZone created an entirely new market for indoor trampoline parks through franchising. Mad Science pioneered and popularized the after-school educational market through franchising. A company called I9 Sports took the organization of youth league sports to the next level using the franchise business model. Senior Helpers was among the first to provide in-home care to seniors through franchising. Shelf Genie and 101 Mobility expanded home improvement and home accessibility services through franchising. Doctors Express, now called American Family Care, pioneered franchising in the health and medical fields. There is no doubt that franchising touches all kinds of industries, and it's a global way of doing business. I have had the opportunity to work with franchise systems in more than 24 countries. And given the diversity of industries, markets, and organizations with which I have worked, I have had the chance to learn something new each and every day. As a franchise consultant for more than 30 years, I have had the privilege of working with many of the world's greatest entrepreneurs, a list far, far too long to recount here. I have been honored to know many of the people who have changed the landscape of the world's economy while leaving millionaire franchisees in their wake. And I have had the misfortune of seeing what happens when franchising does not work out for the franchisee. Despite the occasional failure, I believe franchising is the greatest expansion strategy ever conceived for both the franchisor and the franchisee. So why haven't I bought one myself? Simply put, I am not cut out for the job. I love what I do far too much to abandon it and follow a system developed by someone else. And frankly, franchising is not the right path for everyone. In this book, one of the first tasks I will set for you is a brutal self-evaluation. Are you cut out for business ownership? And if you are you well suited to a role in which you will have to adhere to brand standards that are established and enforced by the franchisor? For those who decide they are well suited to franchising, choosing a franchise is not an easy task, and I sincerely hope this book will not make it easier. In fact, if this book succeeds in its job, it should make the franchise buying process more difficult. It should raise your level of healthy skepticism. It should encourage you to do more homework before making what could be the greatest financial decision of your life. It will help you decide if you are a good fit for franchising, if a particular franchise is a good fit for you, and, ideally, I hope it will help you find the perfect business, or avoid your biggest financial disaster. Freedom is in the eye of the beholder. The fact is, even if you faithfully follow every step in this book, you cannot take the risk out of the franchise buying process. For many of you, that may mean jeopardizing your life savings. It may mean starting down a path that, if you fail, could derail your existing career. It will certainly mean sacrifice in the short term. People often go into business for themselves for the freedom that business ownership provides. And as a business owner myself, I can attest to that freedom. You will have the freedom to work 10 to 12 hours per day, perhaps 7 days a week, when you get started. The freedom to watch your key employees leave, probably at the most inopportune times. The freedom to sweat out every payroll. The freedom to wake up in the middle of the night wondering if a 16-year-old kid with an iPhone will post something on the internet so embarrassing that it could cost you your business. And yes, the freedom to see your child's soccer game in the middle of the week without having to ask your boss for permission, assuming, of course, that you work a few extra hours over the weekend. But despite all the travails you will face as a business owner, I would recommend it to almost everyone. You will be in charge of your own success. You will have the satisfaction that comes only from building something lasting. You will be creating a business that could live beyond you and pass on to your heirs, or that you could one day sell, perhaps achieving generational wealth. You will be able to employ people and watch them flourish, knowing you have helped them buy a house, put food on their table, and educate their kids. And if you are successful, you will eventually stop sweating the payrolls and have the freedom to enjoy your life in a way that most of those around you cannot. While the right franchisor will make your journey easier, it will still be up to you to do the hard work. It will be up to you to carry the burden of success. And it will be up to you to shoulder the risk. Risk versus return. In every economics course I have ever taken, the instructor discussed the concept of risk versus return. A low-risk investment, like a treasury bill guaranteed by the U.S. government, will provide a lower return. For someone to induce an investor to take a bigger risk, they need to provide a higher return. The greater the perceived risk, the higher the anticipated return. Never was this maxim in greater need of understanding than in the franchise buying process. Like any business, franchising carries numerous risks. In many cases, the knowledge gained by the franchisor in developing their prototype operations will help you reduce that risk by allowing you to avoid otherwise costly and perhaps fatal mistakes. While most franchisees are happy with their decision to buy a franchise, unfortunately, some are not. Maybe they weren't suited to business ownership. Maybe, like me, they weren't suited for the role of a franchisee. Maybe franchising was right for them, but they chose the wrong industry. Or maybe they purchased a franchise that required more skill or capital than they possessed. When you consider that buying a franchise not only involves an investment of money, but also a commitment of time and effort, choosing the right franchise, or deciding whether to buy a franchise at all, will probably be the biggest financial decision you will make in your life. Not only will it dictate what you will earn and your financial worth, but it may well dictate how you spend your days for the next decade or more. All too many people buy a franchise the way they purchase a car. They may read consumer reports, absorb the relevant statistics, and talk to friends and salesmen. They look at budgets and gas mileage and safety standards, but in the end, they fall in love with the shiniest car on the lot and rationalize their decision. They need that Porsche because it's easier to park in tight spaces. How to use this book. If you are like most listeners, you are about to embark on a journey that may lead to one of the biggest decisions of your life. The goal of this book is to provide you with the tools you need to make that decision. It is not designed to make that decision for you. This book lays out a series of steps that I think a well-informed prospective franchise buyer should consider in making this decision. I have tried to present these steps in a somewhat logical order, but as you hear them, understand that the process of investing in a franchise is a fluid one, and sometimes the steps will occur in a different order. Or, on occasion, you will find there are exceptions to some of these recommendations. For example, one step that is universally recommended in the franchise buying process is to speak with existing franchisees. But a new franchisor may not yet have any existing franchisees, or the ones they have sold may not yet be open. Likewise, while it is wise to visit franchisor locations, some service businesses may be home-based, denying you that opportunity. While I cannot lay out a definitive path, I hope that by using these steps as a guideline, you can help tilt the risk-reward equation in your favor. Selecting the right franchise, assuming franchising is right for you at all, isn't just a question of caveat emptor, buyer beware. It's much too complicated for that. And while you should definitely do a level of due diligence on the franchisor, it is perhaps more important that you focus an equal amount of attention on your capabilities to succeed as their franchisee. When going into business for yourself, you risk your capital, reputation, livelihood, happiness, and a huge investment of your time in return for the independence and financial rewards that may await you as a business owner. In the end, this book is about assessing these risks and measuring whether they are worth the potential return. You can't avoid risk or guarantee return by listening to this book, but I hope it will increase your odds of arriving at the correct conclusion. One of the goals for this book is to help you avoid failure as you consider the path toward franchise ownership. Here are just a few tips that I'll build upon further throughout the book. As you evaluate franchising, take an honest look at your likely strengths and weaknesses as a potential business owner. Don't underestimate the importance of having a strong support network. Never open a business, franchised or not, unless you have sufficient capital resources. Ensure that any franchise you are strongly considering is a good match with your skill set and personal interests. And be thorough in your due diligence of any franchise system you consider, leveraging as many data points as possible in the evaluation process. The purpose of this book is not to eliminate risk. That is not possible in business. Instead, the purpose of this book is to help you accurately assess those risks, help you determine if you can afford to take those risks, provide some guidance on how to minimize those risks, and provide you with guidance on how to fairly assess potential returns. Throughout, I have tried to use clear terms, which is not always easy when writing about a business with very specific terminology and processes. To that end, I will occasionally speak in generalities that are not universally applied within franchising. I have done this to make listening easier, but it occasionally will lead to statements that are not true in all cases. Some of these shortcuts include the following. In discussing franchise laws, definitions, statistics, and best practices, I have taken the liberty to assume we are talking about the United States, which is the world's largest and most competitive franchise marketplace. For listeners outside the U.S., some of what you hear may need to be adapted to your particular market. Franchise laws do not exist in some countries, and in others, they are very different from U.S. laws. Royalties are generally collected as a percentage of gross sales, which is how I'll refer to them in this book. But in some systems, they are collected on gross margin. In others, they may be a flat monthly fee. Or they may be offset, in whole or in part, based on revenues that the franchisor is deriving from product sales. Keep in mind, you should always check with a prospective franchisor on this point, as it could differ depending on the business. Throughout the book, I may refer to franchisors who provide support in the areas of real estate and site selection. Of course, many franchises are home-based or have very limited real estate needs. Again, this depends largely on the type of franchise you are looking to buy. Other generalities will also have exceptions, and while I have tried to choose my words carefully, discussing every exception would make this book seem more like a legal textbook than one focused on making a sound business evaluation. Ultimately, franchising has many faces. In fact, it has almost as many faces as there are franchisors. I hope that this book will make your franchise selection process easier. But just like a franchise, this book makes no guarantees. Hopefully, like a good franchisor, it will offer you direction and support. But as with a franchise, in the end, your success or failure is largely up to you. Good luck on your journey to business ownership. Chapter 1. The Franchise Myth. We've all heard the stories. How 100 shares of McDonald's initial stock offering back in 1965 would be worth millions today. More precisely, those shares would be worth close to $12 million as of this writing. How no McDonald's franchisee has ever failed, although, like all restaurants, Even McDonald's occasionally closes units. But the stories that really get our hearts pumping are the ones where a friend of a friend became a multi-millionaire by buying the right franchise at the right time. Today, they own 12 locations, along with 2 houses, 3 cars, a boat, and a plane. And those stories sound all the more intriguing when we hear that the franchisee was just a regular person. Not some rocket scientist who was always destined for success. Not some rich kid who parlayed daddy's small fortune into a bigger fortune of their own. Just a person with a dream, a little money, and a lot of courage. We could have done that too, if only. We tend to believe the myth. But what is the reality? What is the magic system, and just how magic is it anyway? Busting the franchise myth. Franchising is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful business expansion strategies in the world today. It has helped some of the world's most iconic brands expand far faster than they could have ever dreamed of growing organically. But how did it go mainstream? The answer lies in franchising's fraught beginnings. Early franchisors, like A&W Restaurants, Howard Johnson's, Midas, McDonald's, Century 21, and others, got their start before today's franchise regulations. Back in those days, franchising was a loosely defined concept, but the early successes of these companies popularized franchising as never before. By the early 1960s, hundreds of new franchisors were entering the market. Still, franchising was only a small part of the U.S. economy. Unfortunately, along with the legitimate businesses that were getting into franchising, there were some that ended up as well-publicized failures, and in some cases, outright fraud. For example, in the wake of Kentucky Fried Chicken's success, John J. Hooker, a politician with no restaurant experience, created and quickly franchised a concept called Minnie Pearl's Chicken. When the company began franchising in 1967, it had yet to open its first location. But based on the celebrity endorsement of the country comedian, Hooker sold 300 franchises by early 1968 and went public only months later with just a handful of restaurants open. By 1970, Minnie Pearl's had opened some 250 locations and had closed more than half of them. Most of the remaining restaurants were losing money. The SEC later launched an investigation into the company's accounting practices, eventually forcing the company to liquidate under the pressure of shareholder lawsuits. Comedian Jerry Lewis also got in on the act when he partnered with Network Cinema Corporation in 1969 to launch Jerry Lewis Cinemas as a franchise. Like Minnie Pearl's, Jerry Lewis Cinemas featured a high-profile endorser and a business model that did not work. Full-page ads in Variety magazine urged, "Join Jerry Lewis in the most successful money-making segment of the entertainment industry." By the mid-1970s, the chain had as many as 200 locations before the business collapsed under the weight of its failed franchisees. Not to be outdone, TV host and comedian Johnny Carson partnered with the Swanson family to launch a hamburger and fried chicken franchise called Here's Johnny's in 1969. Again, hundreds of franchises were sold, most closed quickly, and the company declared bankruptcy 10 years later. Of course, this wasn't just some evil cabal of comedians. There were many other early franchisors, some with good intentions and some without, that made headlines when their get-rich-quick schemes and high-pressure sales tactics resulted in hundreds of failed franchisees. And while the families who invested in franchises like McDonald's were living the American dream, others were living the American nightmare. It was against this backdrop that, in 1972, the first of the state franchise laws was passed in California. Essentially, the law required franchisors to make pre-sale disclosures to prospective franchisees to allow them to make an informed decision on their investment. Other states followed California's lead, and in 1979, Congress passed FTC Rule 436, commonly called the Franchise Rule. According to this law, which was updated in 2007, prospective franchisees must receive a prescribed disclosure document, called a Franchise Disclosure Document, or FDD, regarding the franchisor and the contents of their contract prior to exercising the franchise agreement. We will go into much greater detail on the FDD in Chapter 5, but for now, you should know that it is designed to protect the potential franchise buyers by giving them the information they need to make an informed decision on the purchase of a franchise. In creating this rule, lawmakers had to define just what a franchise was, so they could determine whether or not the rule applied to a specific business. In layman's terms, FTC Rule 436 defines a business as a franchise if it meets all three of the following criteria. 1. It allows the franchisee to use its name or trademark in association with a business. 2. It provides significant operating assistance or exercises significant control over the franchisee, providing operations manuals, training, a protected territory, and many other things can trigger this provision of the definition. And 3. It collects a fee, which can be an upfront franchise fee, a royalty, a product markup beyond the wholesale price, or any of a number of other ways franchisors make money off franchisees. While some states that have separate regulations governing franchise sales have their own definitions of what constitutes a franchise, and when a franchisor must register their franchise to sell in that state, for our purposes, it is easiest to think of a franchise as a company that offers you the right to operate using their name and business system in return for a fee. While some early franchisors viewed the model as a get-rich-quick scheme, their mistakes helped create laws that protect us today. No longer a punchline. While the early days of franchising saw both visionary entrepreneurs and slick salespeople armed with poor business models, franchising today has evolved into one of the most dominant methods of business expansion and ownership in the U.S. As more and more businesses adopt franchising as a way to expand, and more franchisees gained experience in their roles, education and best practices specific to franchising began to develop and create the culture of franchising in this country. Federal and state laws were established to better define and regulate franchise relationships. Franchisors learned the importance of systems that were mutually beneficial to the franchisor and their franchisees. In 1960, the International Franchise Association, IFA, was founded to promote franchising. Today, the IFA is a powerful force representing the interests of both franchisors and franchisees. Many years ago, the U.S. Department of Commerce characterized franchising as the wave of the future, and in the U.S., that wave has been landing for the past 7 decades. The result of this prolonged trend is the largest franchise economy in the world. According to the Franchise Business Economic Outlook for 2018 report, prepared by IHS Markit Economics for the IFA Franchise Education and Research Foundation, there are some 759,000 franchise businesses, that is, individual franchise locations in the U.S. Altogether, they directly employ more than 8 million people and generate more than $750 billion in economic output. Today's franchisees are more sophisticated and knowledgeable about franchising than ever before. More of them own multiple locations and are even franchisees of multiple franchise systems. The advancement and integration of technology within franchising has also contributed a great deal to the success of franchising as a business model. Better technology has facilitated the development of operations training, data accumulation, benchmarking of financial data, and the dissemination of best practices within franchise systems. That said, it is easy to understand why the growth of franchising isn't front-page news. After all, the jobs are added a few at a time, as opposed to the Fortune 500 companies that
Sample complete. Ready to continue?